Welcome to this session of Mahara 2504, the new features that we are going to release by the end of the month. That's why the version is called 2504, because it stands for 2025, and the release month, which is April. Like any other version of Mahara, this version is also supported for a year and a half until October 2026. Each version of Mahara is supported by a number of organizations. And so here on screen, you see the ones that have directly contributed to this release by sponsoring features or bug fixes. But I'd also like to call out all subscribing organizations because your financial support supports the project, makes it possible that we can continue maintaining the software, issuing bug fixes, and also creating new features that are on our roadmap, but also other features, other smaller ones that we put in outside of that. And so the organizations here that you see on screen, some of them have contributed smaller features or larger features in the case of Monash University, for example, or also Health NZ Te Whatu Ora. We also have a couple of community contributions from the Université de Lorraine and Université de Montréal, where the in-house developers have contributed code, changes that they have made for their organizations, and now they are available for everybody in the community as well. So thank you to everybody who has been part of this release, whose organization has contributed for us to give you this new version of Mahara that you'll see within the week. And so we have three focuses in this release. And the first one is that we wanted to make initial changes that were a result of the community consultation that we had last year. So some of you might remember that they have been interviewed by our business analyst, so that he could hear what works for you in Mahara, what doesn't work for you, what you would like to see, what your current workflow is. And he's also conducted a review of our information architecture, and all of that combined resulted in the usability review and proposal that we had made last year and refined over the last few months, in particular also in a series of mock-ups. So our graphic designer, Yvonne, pretty much looked at every single screen in Mahara and created a new mock-up for it, taking all of those ideas into account and also making it work on mobile. And so some of those screens, just a very small selection of them, I've shared just recently in a video so that you can have a better idea of what Mahara 2604 would look like. And a link to that video is in the shared notes, along with some other resources if you want to grab the links from there. Another focus is that we laid the technical groundwork for the usability changes in Mahara 2604. So there'll be quite a few changes that we are making, in particular to the navigation and the overview screens. So it is necessary that we do that kind of in one go. And since all of that work was still ongoing during the current release cycle of Mahara 2504, we couldn't really implement those things. And so we've taken the time to get started on a whole bunch of that back-end work that is necessary to support all of those changes that you will be seeing in the next version. But we've also already implemented some usability improvements in this version as well, so that you can take advantage of them. And like usual, we've also implemented a number of new portfolio features, as well as actually quite a few administrative features that make the administration of Mahara more efficient, oftentimes also more flexible, and therefore easier for administrators to work with Mahara, and also have fewer support requests or get certain tasks done more quickly. So we always try to put in features that support the learners or portfolio authors, teaching staff, and then also the support staff. So it's not just always one group, but we keep all three groups in mind. And so what we had started, as I already said, was the wider usability review, for which you also find the link in the shared notes. And you can watch the video later on, along also with the mockups. And we would definitely also love to hear your feedback on the proposed changes that we are making in our usability forum in particular, that we are also using to get your opinions on some of the changes. So please do subscribe to that in order to receive an email when we are having questions, if you'd like to participate and give your opinion on some of those changes, so that we also know more and more how you're using Mahara in your own practice and what we would need to keep in mind. But now what I wanted to do is kind of just show you a bunch of the changes that we have made so that you get a better idea of what you can expect next week, but also already actually get started today if you like, because on our developer environment that is publicly available online, you can test all of these new features already. And if you'd like to test some of those administrative features, just let me know so I can change your permission level. Okay, actually, nope, I need my administrator. So here we have a standard Mahara site. As you can see, the icons do look a bit different than they looked before, and that is one of the refreshed changes that we have made, namely to use a different icon set within Mahara. And so we switched from Font Awesome to material icons because we do have a bit more flexibility with those icons, also in the representation and how we can use them. So that's why the icons do look a bit different. We tried to align them still to the old icons that we had. And in some cases, though, we chose new ones because suddenly we had more available and had more choice to make those things look a bit easier to identify what we were actually meaning. So that's one of the refresh changes that we have already implemented in Mahara 2504. But now to one of the biggest functionalities that we've put in that are enhancing how to work with the continuing professional development plugin that we have. And that allows us that we can now essentially have what we call a CPD experience, so that if your students need to collect a certain amount of CPD hours, or also your staff if you're using it for them, for their continuing professional development, then you can bundle those things up and give them a better idea of where they are currently at and where they are needing to be. And so that is what we can now do in Mahara. And here I've prepared one earlier for engineering students in their final year. Since I've already set it up and it is in use, I am being asked whether I want to make an update so that I'm conscious that I'm changing things for existing account holders. In this case, I do want to make some changes. So I can give the experience a title, I can give it a short description, and that really is just internal notes for the administrator. And any of these experiences can be set up on the site level, but also on the institution level, so that you can define more clearly which group of learners should be able to should be able to see the experience, especially when you're on a multi-tenanted site. Then you can give it a number of minimum hours, which is a required number. But you could also give it a maximum number of hours. If it's left empty, students can record as many hours as they like. And you can also say whether it is active or not. If you have used Smart Evidence, you also have the concept of active and inactive. And active means that anybody can select that experience when they create CPD activities. If it is inactive, anybody who has already started using the experience can continue working with it. But people that haven't already used it cannot use it, but can only use any of the others that are available. And now we can give it some categories. So a category means that if you're imagining things as a total number of hours, that you can say, okay, in this case, out of these 420 hours, 210 hours need to come from engineering. And then you can say the other 210 hours can come from non-engineering experiences. And we have two levels of categories. A super level, where you can align things. And so you could say the minimum number of hours, maximum number of hours if you like, and also number of reflections that need to be added, and whether that category can receive hours. So whether students can log hours against it. And then within that big category, we can have subcategories. In this case, the engineering curriculum is a subcategory of engineering experiences. And there we can say, okay, it can have a minimum number of hours and a maximum number of hours. And in this case, no reflections. Here, we haven't set a minimum number of hours, and that means that students can, but don't have to, fulfill any of these hour criteria in the engineering curriculum, but could log everything just against the overall category of engineering experiences. And so you can continue adding as many categories and subcategories as you like, and they can have different values associated with it that students can then use and log their hours against. Now, if I am a student, and I'm my default student Paula, what I can now do is go to my CPD part of the portfolio, and I've already logged a number of activities here, and set up a new activity. And I can do a leadership training, for example. And here, now with the experience, I have the engineering CPD final year students experience available, which then also results in me seeing the categories. And since this is a non-engineering experience, I select that, but I also see that I actually have a subcategory for it set up. So I can choose that one. And I've spent 4 hours on that training, give it a start date, and can give it an end date. That can also be the same dates. The experiences are either on the site level or on the institution level, so they cannot be restricted to Mahara groups because an administrator is setting them up, so they are restricted by site or institution. Now we've also added a number of additional fields in this CPD activity form, so that we don't just have location and organization available, but students can also add the contact name, the title of the person who was their mentor, their email address, phone number, making it easier for a university tutor or assessor to get in touch with the supervisor if needed. I can also leave a short description and then a reflection. So that is then typically a text reflection, but of course I can also add files or add images directly within here. And I can also give it some tags if I like. Now that I've saved my activity, it is added to my general log of CPD activities, because on this screen, we are just keeping a very long list of everything that students have collected. And it is within the portfolio that then the changes are made, what is being displayed. So if I now go to that part of my portfolio, I can go to my CPD activities page, and you can actually already set all of that up in a template. So to your question, Ed, while you can only set up the experiences on the site or institution level, you could set up a template with the CPD activities block and also the overview blocks, so that the information automatically flows through, and you just pre-select a CPD experience from the list. So if I'm now going to find the CPD activities, I now have the option to select an experience. And so I'm going to do that for the engineering CPD final year students one. And if I wanted to, I could also select a category that I wanted to see. So we are very flexible so that students can create separate pages for different categories and add more content, add more reflections than they might just want to write on their short activity to their portfolio page, so that they can still work with all the Mahara functionalities in order to build their portfolio. So it can be quite granularly set up. Right now, I'm just going to show all the categories here. And since we've selected the CPD experience, we cannot further restrict the activities based on tags, because we are already restricting things according to the experience. And then I can save my view. So if I look at that, you can see that at the top, we now see the requirements. That I need to have a minimum of 420 hours. Currently, eligible hours are 65 that have been recorded, and I've done 1 reflection out of 9. And when I click the row for the activity, I can see all the additional details that I have put in, so that I have quick access to them, but also see the overview with the total hours. And you see a discrepancy between the total hours and the eligible hours. And that is because I've logged more hours against the category where only fewer hours count. And that's why it is important to work with the minimum number of hours and maximum hours in order to really suss out which hours can count for the student. What you can also do is that when you are in details mode, you can directly make changes to the CPD activities and edit or delete certain activities, or also add a new activity directly from the portfolio screen. So you don't need to go into the main menu CPD and then add things there, but if your portfolio page is already open, then you can work from there. Now, so this was part 1 of the implementation. And another really important part and really good part I find is that we now can also have a CPD overview, because tabular information can be quite detailed. And so what we have developed is that CPD overview block, where we can see everything for a particular experience in a graphical format, so that it's easy to see how much I've already accomplished from my CPD, and then how many hours are still left to do. And so we see that for the overall total and also the reflections, and then also have that detailed overview available if we wanted to drill deeper, so that we can see the categories and then also the subcategories by themselves in order to see where things are at. So I'm really, really happy that we could put this functionality into Mahara to support the tracking of continuing professional development activities, and also provide this graphical overview for students and also staff to quickly see how much work they still need to do or how much they have already accomplished. And I see some very positive notes about this functionality. So I hope you will have the chance to explore that also with your students and see how you can support them in their tracking. And also the reflection on the CPD activities. And there you can give them guidance on hand via the help icon, for example, and then either link to a more detailed document or even change the words in that help icon in an activity in order to provide them with direct guidance of what you would like to see in that reflection. So here the help icon can contain just the regular Mahara information, or you can tailor that to your own institution via a local language string. Now, another feature that we have implemented as part of the usability changes is that when we are having an image on the page, we have the image block. If I wanted to have an image gallery and have a second image in there, in the past I needed to delete the block and then put the image gallery block onto the page and then have my image gallery. This is not needed anymore because we've combined the image and image gallery blocks, taking away that mental overhead of deciding up front whether you wanted to have one image or multiple images available. So what you can do now, and upon an upgrade, it's automatically handled that you will see this combined version for the images, is that you can decide directly whether you want to select images just by an image, or whether you want to get everything from within a folder. And so if I leave my selection here by image, I can of course upload images, or I can already select existing images, and then automatically my multi-image presentation kicks in, where I decide whether I want to show thumbnails or a slideshow. I click Save, and automatically, without needing to change the block, do I now have an image gallery. And of course, if I take one image away, then it is just a single image display again. So that is one nice thing to reduce the number of block types that we have, yet also keep the flexibility and guidance for our learners to add their content. Some of you might have already explored another feature in Mahara that in the past was called peer assessment. And that peer assessment makes it possible for other people on the portfolio to leave an assessment in a particular place directly in the portfolio page. And I can give the direct instructions for that person. So every block that a peer needs to fill in can have very specific instructions for them so that they know what they need to do. But that was not possible for self-assessment. And for self-assessment, the regular text block had been used. However, when a learner needed to make changes to their self-assessment during the submission process, the assessor then never really saw what additions have been made to that initial comment. And that's why we now expanded the peer assessment block to also take self-assessment into consideration, so that I can now change the assessment type from peer to self-assessment and set things up. So here we have the regular peer assessment block. And as you can see, as portfolio author, you can't really do anything because it's not your block to provide content in. Now, if I put the self-assessment block onto the page, I choose the same block type. And again, I can give it some instructions and then select the self-assessment option. Save that. And now I do see the option for me to leave a self-assessment. So that is very easily done. By clicking it, I can see the instructions so that I know what I need to do specifically in this area. And then I can write my self-assessment or reflection. And similarly to the peer assessment, I can keep that as a draft so that only I can see it. Or once I've published it, everybody else who has access to the portfolio and is allowed to see that comment can view it. And so once I've published it also, it gets a timestamp. So I can change it for 10 minutes, but not much after that. And so if I did want to make any more changes, I would just add another self-assessment to it and publish that, making it very easy for my assessor to then see what else I had said. And I just note that the alert still says peer assessment saved, so we definitely need to change that. So that is part of the release testing then. Now, if I'm looking at the peer assessment, I have shared my portfolio with Anna, and she has the role of peer. So that means that when she views that portfolio that has been shared with her, because the institution settings are such that the peer can see the content of the portfolio, she does see the self-assessment and also any other content there, and can now leave a peer assessment. She also has her specific instructions available and can write her text, again, saving it as draft or publishing it. And saving as draft really comes in handy when the peer assessor does want to think more about what they want to write rather than publish it immediately. And, with the peer assessment, because somebody else is writing the text, we do note down the name of the person and also their profile picture so that it's easy to follow up with them if you want to do so. So that is also a nice functionality to expand the assessment options within Mahara and bringing that that formative assessment element in, and also making it easier for a person themselves as well as also their peers to communicate in particular areas on the portfolio. And yes, the peer cannot delete self-assessments, or at least should not be able to do so. This could potentially be because I'm also logged in as a site administrator, but I will check that again during the testing once I get to this peer assessment one for the release, because I had thought we had changed it so that it's, definitely only the author should be able to delete it, but I am logged in as site admin. So some of the things could be available there then just because I have elevated permissions. But yes, in general, a peer should not be able to delete somebody else's comments. No, they can though delete their own. So these were a couple of features that we have implemented on the portfolio side of things. And since I know that many of you here in the room are responsible for Mahara instances, either are site administrators or institution administrators, I do want to show you a feature that might be of interest to you. And so that is that sometimes you might see this, and some of you might have also reported this error message to us, that the Mahara site is unavailable, a non-recoverable error occurred. This probably means you have encountered a bug in the system. That's when you usually receive an email from our team or an update on the forum post or in the issue tracker saying, okay, so what is the actual error message, please? Because this is a generic one, so that we are not disclosing potentially sensitive information on screen. And so what has been possible since the last version of Mahara is that anybody could report this issue directly to a site administrator or also an institution administrator. And there it was just necessary that at least one of the administrators has set the issue report to either email digest, or inbox. Doesn't have to be all the administrators, because we want to be conscious that not everybody receives an email and then 5 people might be looking into things. So it is always an administrator who needs to enable that. A site administrator can decide whether also institution administrators should be able to receive those notifications. So that's in particular of interest on multi-tenanted sites, so that not everything just lands with the institution or with the site administrator. Now, if you're going back to our homepage then and looking at that error message, suddenly there is a report this issue button. When I click that, a pop-up window comes up where I can now say what has happened in order to get this issue, and I can send that off to the administrator. The administrator receives an email stating that an issue report has been made. We do not disclose the error message, though, in that email, again, to prevent that potentially personal information is shared outside of Mahara, and therefore that the administrator definitely needs to log into Mahara in order to see it. So that is all existing functionality. So here I have my issue report, and I can see the steps that I have taken, and then I can see the actual error message, including kind of technical details there. So now the new feature in Mahara 2504 is that you can forward that information to a technical team. So that can be the team at your institution or the at your service provider, so that they can deal with it. Or you could also report it to us, and an issue report is automatically created, and we are then communicating with you via email. If you're using the functionality to report issues to us, though, I would very much like to have people see first to check that it's not just a problem on their side, but that it really is also a problem in Mahara Core, because our Mahara team does not manage all of your instances. So if there are very particular problems tied to a specific student and one needs to log into the actual site to see the problem, then that is not necessarily something that we can help you with. Therefore, please do check out first whether you can actually replicate the issue before sending it to us. The escalation does need to be turned on specifically. Once you have done that, you can put the escalation email into the field. So that can be any email address that you'd like to put in there. Per default, ours is mentioned here, and that would then be used. So if I now go back to my inbox, I can select the issue report that I want to report. And if you have two of the same or that are very similar, you can actually report them both at the same time. And only one issue is being set up. One email is sent. But if you have different issue types, I would recommend to escalate them individually so that different tickets are set up and conversations kept separate. So now under bulk options, I can select escalate issue reports, and then I see a pop-up window where I can briefly outline what the issue is. So essentially that is your email subject. In the notes, you have all the information that was in the issue report already mentioned. So the steps that were taken and also the error message. Now it is on you to strip out any personally identifiable information or information about your Mahara site that you don't want to share. So of course that should only be done when you share it with an external party, like putting it into the Mahara issue tracker where other organizations can see it. If you're forwarding that information to your internal support team, then it might be better to leave most of that information in so that they can check the problem directly. So you can add more context to the notes, expand on things, provide also your own test steps that you have already taken, your verification that it is a problem, and how it can be replicated, especially if the student who reported the issue hasn't provided any of those steps. Then you are also sending some other information along that you cannot edit because that is really only environment information that helps us with the troubleshooting so that you don't need to fill in our checklist of items of what you have already, of that we know what your environment looks like. So that is just a convenience so that we know a bit more and don't have to ask as many questions. Then, because you are sending information now outside of Mahara, you can double check what the email address is to which it goes, and also which email address will be receiving replies. Because we are not sending replies back into the Mahara system, but communicate via email. So kind of like you're used to from other ticketing systems. So that I find is really nice, especially for administrators who might not yet be representatives in our subscriber portal and therefore not yet have access to the issue reports themselves, to any of the to the issue and enhancement tracker. But through using the escalation, they can send their issues directly into our tracker. And then when we post replies there, they will come through via email. And then you can reply via email and follow the exchange on like that. And so that is an administrator feature that will hopefully make it easier for you to report issues either to our team that we need to follow up or to your own technical support team for them to follow up instead of all administrators always receiving everything and seeing everything. So once this issue has been reported, it does state that it has been reported. And if multiple administrators receive those issue reports and can do the escalation, it will also mention which administrator has already escalated it, just so that there are not so many double ups happening, just because multiple administrators might escalate the same thing. And another small feature that I wanted to show you, because it will come up when you're upgrading your site, is that you can now enter a custom maintenance message when you close your site. So in the past, it always just said site closed for maintenance or database upgrade. But now you can state when, for example, it might be open again for people to use or any other information that you want to put in. So that is a small feature, but also quite useful for administrators. And so these were the few highlights that I wanted to show you today about that you can experience in Mahara 2504. We have a whole bunch of other features implemented and also bug fixes that you can see on our issue and enhancement tracker. And I recently made a video of how to work with this tracker and also our wiki, in case some of you are not yet familiar with GitLab so much, so that you can make a bit more sense of what is happening there. And so in this case, that link immediately takes you to anything tagged with the milestone 2504 and the label enhancement, so that you can follow up on all of the new 36 features. And if I just take the label enhancement away, then we get the whole list of all the items that have been fixed in Mahara 2504. And you can see there are a few that are still open, and those are the ones that we have found during release candidate testing. So if you wanted to participate in that release candidate testing, please do feel free to do so on our developer instance to which you have access. And the link to that is in the shared notes, so that you don't even have to install a Mahara 2504 on your servers in order to test the new functionality. But of course, you're also very welcome to test it on your own infrastructure. If you have any questions or would like to let us know how you find any of these features, please do use our community forums for that. And you can also come along to our Mahara events. Every month we do have Ask Me Anything sessions. We've just had the one for April about 13 hours ago now. And the next one will be in May for the Northern Hemisphere. And so every month we are alternating, for Europe and Africa. So every month we are alternating between that part of the world and also the Americas, so that we can cover as much of the world as possible. And these AMA sessions are really there for any questions that you have to be asked. And often we only have a few people turn up at these, which is really nice, because then we can be very individual about the questions that they have and can help people understand Mahara better and what they can do with it. So please do take advantage of these sessions. You can come with questions or also comments on functionality that you're using or things you would like to explore. And that now leaves us with a few minutes for anybody to ask questions directly if you have any, or for me to go over some other features or existing features, features that you've seen today, if you have any particular questions for those. So thank you so much, everybody, for having come along to the session. And I do look forward to seeing you some other time at one of the events.